3 years ago, I bought a house on about 4 acres of land outside of town, and I want to be upfront that I love it out here. Quiet and private. Nobody in my business. Exactly what I wanted after 38 years of apartments and neighbors and shared walls. The property has a long gravel driveway that curves up from the road through a stretch of old oak trees before opening up to the house. At night, you can't see the road from the porch, and you can't see the house from the road. That kind of privacy felt like a selling point when I bought it. It stopped feeling like one about 6 months in. The porch light is one of those old fixtures that came with the house, cast iron, mounted beside the front door, controlled by a simple interior switch. No timer and no motion sensor, no smart home connection of any kind. You flip it on and it comes up. You flip it off and it goes up. That's the whole system. I don't use it much. I go to bed early and I'm not in the habit of leaving lights on, and I don't get visitors at night, so there's no real need for it. I'd gone weeks at a stretch without touching the switch at all. So the first time I woke up at 2 in the morning and noticed the orange glow coming through my bedroom curtains, I assumed I left it on by mistake and fell back asleep without thinking much about it. I got up in the morning, switched it off, and moved on with my day. A week later, I woke up again. Same time, same glow through the curtains. I lay there for a moment, trying to remember if I used the porch that evening. I hadn't. I got up and switched it off and stood in the kitchen for a minute and then went back to bed. The third time I started paying attention. I'm not a person who jumps to conclusions. I spent 22 years as a project manager, and that kind of work beats the instinct for magical thinking right out of you. When something goes wrong, you find the cause, you fix the cause, and you move on. So when the porch light started coming on by itself, my instinct was to find the cause. Faulty wiring seemed most likely. Old house, old fixture, old switch that maybe wasn't fully breaking the circuit when I flipped it down. I checked the switch. It seemed fine. But I'm not an electrician, so I called one out. He went over the fixture and the switch and the wiring to that circuit and found nothing wrong. Charged me $200 to tell me everything looked fine. I thanked him and he left, and 3 nights later the light came on again at 2 in the morning. I replaced the switch myself. Bought a new one from the hardware store, watched a video, swapped it out in 20 minutes. New switch, same result. The light came on at 2 a.m., the switch in the off position, with no explanation. I replaced the entire fixture next. Took the old cast iron one down and put up a new LED model. Different wiring, different housing, different everything. Stood back and felt pretty good about it. 2 nights later, around 2 a.m., the new fixture lit up the driveway like it had been doing it for years. I want to be honest about how long I sat with this house before I did anything about it. The answer is embarrassingly long. A couple of months. I'd wake up, see the glow, lie there for a minute, get up and turn it off and go back to bed. It had become routine enough that I stopped losing sleep over it and started just accepting it and explaining it off as annoying, unexplained, and probably just something I'd figure out eventually. What changed my mind about sitting with it was purely practical. I have a dog named Ruth, a 7-year-old shepherd mix, and Ruth sleeps at the foot of my bed every night without exception. She has done this since the week I got her, and in the 7 years, she has never once gotten up in the middle of the night on her own. Not for water, not for anything. She just sleeps. One night in November, I woke up to the light and noticed Ruth wasn't at the foot of the bed. I sat up and found her standing at the bedroom window with her nose to the gap in the curtain, completely still, not growling or whining, just standing there looking out the driveway. I got up and stood beside her and looked out. The driveway was lit by the porch light, per usual. The gravel, the oaks on either side, the darkness beyond where the driveway curved toward the road. All of it sitting in that flat orange light. I stood there for a few minutes and saw nothing and went back to bed. Ruth stayed at the window. In the morning, I went outside and walked the driveway. The gravel near the middle of the curve, where the oaks are the thickest on either side, had been disturbed. Not dramatically or like a struggle, just scuffed and pressed in a pattern that took me a moment to identify. Boot prints. Somebody had been standing in the gravel in the middle of my driveway. Standing there long enough and still enough that the prints were deep and clear, both feet planted facing the house. I stood there looking at them in the morning light and thought about the porch light coming on at 2 a.m. for months, and Ruth at the window, and felt something settle over me that I hadn't felt in a very long time. I put up a trail camera that afternoon. One of the good ones, motion activated, infrared night vision, mounted on an oak about halfway down the driveway, pointed at the curve where the prints had been. I didn't tell anyone about it, I just put it up and waited. 4 nights later, I pulled the car. There was footage. At 2:06 a.m., the camera triggered. A man came around the curve from the direction of the road on foot, unhurried, hands at his sides. He walked to almost the exact spot where I'd found the boot prints and stopped. He stood there facing the house with the porch light on above the front door. He was wearing dark work clothes and boots and a cap pulled low, and from the angle in the infrared, I couldn't make out his face clearly. He stood there for 11 minutes without moving. Then he turned and walked back around the curve toward the road and was gone. The timestamp on the footage was the same night the porch light had come on. I called the county sheriff's office the next morning and a deputy came out, and I showed him the footage and the boot prints, which were still visible. He watched the footage twice and asked me how long this had been going on, and I told him about the light and the months I'd spent trying to explain it away, and watched his expression settle into something careful and professional. He He took the camera card as evidence and told me to call immediately if anything else happened and to keep my doors locked. He came back 2 later with a detective. They'd identified the man from the footage using a partial on his boot sole that matched a specific work boot brand and some other details I wasn't given in full. He lived 4 miles from my property. He had a history that the detective described carefully as relevant to this type of situation without being more specific than that. I asked what he was doing standing in my driveway for 11 minutes in the middle of the night. The detective said they were working on establishing that. I asked how he was turning the porch light on from my driveway with no remote access to my electrical system. There was a pause, and then the detective asked me to show him the light switch inside. He went in and I showed him, and he crouched down and looked at the switch plate and then asked me for a screwdriver. He took the plate off the wall. Behind it, tucked into the wall cavity alongside the wiring, was a small device I didn't recognize. Wireless, about the size of a thumb drive, attached to the wire with a simple clip. A remote switch receiver, the kind you can buy online for $30 or so. Clip it to any light's wiring, pair it with a handheld transmitter, and you can turn that light on and off from a distance without touching the switch. He'd been standing at the curve of my driveway with the transmitter in his pocket, turning my porch light on like a signal or a test or something else I still haven't fully worked out. The case went through the system, and I was told he pled to a lesser charge related to trespassing and unlawful entry. I don't know when he was in my house to install the device, and I don't know how many times he'd been on my property before the camera went up. I don't know what the light meant to him or what he was waiting for standing there in the dark looking at my house. I had the switch and all the wiring on that circuit replaced. New fixture, new everything. Swept by an electrician who knew what he was looking for this time. The light doesn't come on by itself anymore. Ruth still checks the window sometimes at night though. She just gets up quietly and stands there with her nose at the curtain gap, looking out at the driveway. I always get up and look with